Hi everyone, and welcome to ARPAS-UK Fireside Chat number 3. My name is Anne-Lise Scaillierez, and I'm delighted to have with me David Thurston. We are both directors of ARPAS, and today's topic is going to be drone class marking in the UK in 2026. Now, David, can you walk us through what is happening about drone class marking in the UK?
Yeah, well, what's kicked this off really is an announcement from the CAA that the government have awarded them the rights to become the market surveillance authority for class marking drones. A little bit of background if people don't know that class markings of drones are sort of a manufacturing standard that the drones have to adhere to. And the Market Surveillance Authority is the organisation that will make sure those drones adhere to those class marking standards that are set out in the implementing or delegated regulation, actually. And so a week or so ago, the CA were told that they're going to be the Market Surveillance Authority for doing that. And what we do know is that the transition period for legacy drones ends in January 2026. So it will be, that's when the class mark drones, well, we'll be looking at, we have to have class mark drones in place by then, basically, unless there's an extension of the transition period. So I guess we want to talk about what that could mean. So I think primarily we're looking at really A2. So we currently have A1 drones, like the Mavic, the minis, the DJI minis that are below 250 gram drones. Then we're looking at C1 drones, which can be up to 900 grams. And just looking at the old, so what I'm looking at now here is the old open category fact sheet where it did still have class marked drones on there. And so I'm trying to have a look to see what, perhaps that's what we're going to look at now, but it replicates that. I mean, it would be quite a big change in implementing regulation if it wasn't going to replicate what was originally planned. Now, would you agree with that, Anne-Lise? I think that.
Well, so at the moment, it's still a bit early to make any definitive judgment. But what we can assess is that drone manufacturers that are class marked in Europe will not create a UK-specific drone. So we will have class mark in the UK probably mimicking what's happening in Europe, so that it is a form of rubber stamp for drones that are already vetted in Europe. So we can assess that, or suppose that C1, C2 would be relatively similar, so that the CA does not reinvent the wheel, really. But I mean, let's see if that is really the case.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's quite a good point, actually, because it's worth talking about the fact that there's two things here. There's what the drone can and can't do as part of the manufacturing standard, and then there's what you're then allowed to legally do with that drone if it meets that class marking standard. So, for example, I think a lot of this is going to be A2 and come under A2 CFC, the A2 certificate of competency, where we'll be able to fly within 30 meters of uninvolved people, and or 5 meters in low speed mode, and a lot of part of the class marking is going to be that low speed mode. And yeah, I agree with you. I think it's unlikely that CA are going to veer too much from what other countries have stipulated for the class markings, but what they can change quite a bit, perhaps, is what you're then allowed to do with those drones with that class marking.
Yeah, and actually, if we go back in time, class marking was originally the topic back in 2020, I guess. And that has been implemented in Europe, and there has been some return of experience in the open category in Europe. A few elements here. I think we can fairly say that the open category has been expanding in Europe, definitely, and the vast majority of operations are in the open category. At the same time, another return of experience is that in some countries, they have actually limited the use of the open category because they had some backlash from stakeholders, cities, local governments, airports, etc., that were not really comfortable about the idea of having lots of drones very close to uninvolved people in urban environment, and the way they capped the use of the open category is, for example, via the no-fly zones. For example, if you
Yeah.
look at France and Germany, and if you look at the maps of where you can and cannot fly with a drone, you will see that pretty much every urban environment is a no-flight zone in the open category. So
That makes it pretty useless then, doesn't it, though?
yeah, I mean, bottom line, it means that in those countries, the open category is in practice not very useful. And I guess
Mm.
for us, it opens a set of questions. And, the topic is very new, so we don't need to agree, but we can question ourselves. So, I mean, what do we think? Is it reasonable to actually have overflight in urban environment with drones? If we look at class marking C2, it's up to 4 kilos with a training requirement, which is the A2 COC, or would we consider more advanced training in that category, knowing that actually apparently the statistics is that the majority of incidents with drones, just like in crewed aviation, are more on the human error than on the drone itself. I mean,
Mhm.
Open forum on this one. What do you think, David?
Yeah, I mean, I find this an interesting one because I think if you want to say the A2 CFC is not a good enough qualification for flying in an urban area, it requires quite a fundamental change to the whole basis of what the A2 category is of the open category. Yeah, so whilst I don't necessarily disagree with the concept that it might not be good enough for open urban area operations, it's quite a fundamental change to the whole basic tenet of the A2 subcategory of the open category. So I'm not sure we're 100% aligned on that particular issue.
And to a certain extent, we're more debating more than anything else on this matter. My understanding is that the decision is not so much with the CAA, but possibly more at the DFT level. There is also a question. There are several questions that come into play. I mean, safety is number one argument, of course, and there was this question about adequate training. Then there is another question, which is public perception. What would
Yeah.
people think? And honestly, I don't think neither of you, you and I, can't answer that question. But it's a fair question. What would people think about it? And then the third element that we can also raise is enforcement, and it plays also with the public perception. I mean, we say that the difference between the open and the specific category is the level of risk, but actually, to a certain extent, maybe it's more important to say that the oversight in the specific category is by the CAA. In the open category, it's meant to be the police, but we can all understand that the police has other stuff to do than
Mm.
chase illegal use of drones. So, I mean, it's a melting pot of decision criteria that would have to be taken into consideration on that topic.
I think enforcement is quite a good point because I just think it's a big task for the police to have the knowledge to say, yes, that drone you're flying that within 30 meters of an uninvolved person and it's a class mark drone, blah, 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 to actually work out whether a crime's been committed at all. It is a very difficult situation for enforcement. Absolutely.
So let's see what I mean. Let's see, and hopefully try and have a conversation about these topics.
Yeah.
Maybe, I mean, unless you would like to discuss further on this one. I mean, another element is the timescale, because it's not such an easy task actually to implement class marking in a country. So, do you have any data points on the timescale of its
I
implementation?
don't, but I was just thinking about the logistics of it. So if we're looking at January 2026 as the target for class mark drones, and the CIA have just been handed the responsibility of being the market surveillance authority, if you just think about timescales, what's it going to take? How long is it going to take them to recruit? And they've said in their statement that they're looking to recruit people to take on this task. So, how long is it going to find the appropriate people you would be wanting to recruit with the necessary skills? Then you've got to go through a recruitment process. Then those people have to hand in notices at previous employers, and then they're going to need a certain amount of time to, learn the processes, induction, how get up to speed with running that department, and then they've got to do the actual job of class marking drones. That's a lot to do by January 2026, I think. So
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a challenging task. I mean, can they resource? I mean, it's all down to, I think, how quickly the CIA can resource to do this.
Yeah, maybe what could be happening, let's see, is that there is maybe not necessarily an extension of the current transition, but still a form of transition until things are settled with a view to actually implement class marking. It might be, to be honest, that they're not going to spend a lot of time redoing class marking that is already implemented in Europe or in the US, for example, and it will be just an A4 sheet of paper saying, yes, we've reviewed whatever work and the files that has been compiled for other tier 1 authorities. It's fine with us. And the real work would really be with regards to doing class marking for domestic manufacturers, if there are domestic manufacturers wishing to get a class marking in the open category.
No, I totally agree. And I mean, this, as I said, those timescales are tight, but as you say, I think they could be. I mean, if they just take on board what has happened in Europe with class markings, and then just bring back the old open category, putting the class markings, well, they actually still exist there. It's just that the guidance, it's been taken out of the guidance, but they actually do still exist in the regulation. So that's probably fairly quick to do if that's what they decide to do, is just go with what Europe have done. So the template's pretty much there.
I guess another important point will be the legacy. And what I mean by that is a sort of ensuring that the current fleet of drones can still fly after January 2026. If you say class marking is a must for A1, A2, A3 anywhere in the open categories, then suddenly you realize that if your drone is not class marked, then you can't fly it anymore. Well, it's been flying, you've been using it for years without any issue. So it seems pretty reasonable that there is a transition so that the existing drone fleet can still be used at the strict minimum in A3, for example, by drone operators.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot's going to depend on when your drone was manufactured, because there's a lot of drones that we're operating in the UK, Mavic 3s, for example, that are class marked in Europe, that could be class marked here, so they actually meet those requirements by default. Will the CA? I mean, actually, I was thinking about that as well, because there was something about if you wanted to go and fly your drone in Europe or something, you could get a little sticker to put on it to show the class marking on it, because it'd been sold in the UK, it didn't have the right class marking on it. So I'm wondering if something like that for those sort of, they're not legacy drones because they were manufactured with class marking in mind. So it'd be interesting to see how the mechanics and logistics of that actually works. I mean, I think it'd probably be relatively simple to do that, and I hope that is a consideration. It's not. I hope that people don't have to go out and buy a brand new drone, even though their old drone is perfectly capable of being a class marked drone.
Yeah, you're very right.
Mavic 2s, for example, that were pre-class marking, so that they're probably going to be they'll be the legacy drones that you're unlikely going to be able to fly in the A2 category after this.
Well, it would make a lot of sense, and that would be aligned with the the government's new regulatory approach in terms of cutting the red tape and making the regulation as easy and accessible. And you're very right. If you have a drone that is EU class marked, it's been vetted. And if indeed the policy in the UK is to review but accept, generally speaking, EU class marked, then it would make sense that it's a seamless transition for those drones starting January 2026.
Will they? I mean, it is interesting. Will those drones need to be? Will there need to be some sort of indication on them to show that they meet those class markings like they are in Europe? It'd be interesting to see what they come up with that. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. Anything else we can discuss and debate for now, I mean, we're on the 31st of March, so I'm sure there will be further information as we go along during the following weeks or months. Anything else you'd like to discuss or share?
Well, yeah, I mean, the only thing I'd like to sort of really pose really is that there are a lot of people operating under operational authorizations now with, say, Mavic, that they sort of A2 size drones, whether they'll then drop out of the operational authorization arena, the specific category, into the open category for their operations. And it'd be interesting because I think there's been a lot of talk about drop-in OA numbers being, so cataclysmic for the industry, but it might be that this is a progression that people just don't need GVCs and operational authorizations to operate the drones they are currently operating. So it might not be, if there is a drop in OA numbers, it might, and because of this, it was not necessarily a bad thing for the industry if people are still operating under the open category.
Yeah, you're very right. I think depending on what operators can do in terms of overflight and flying in urban environment and very close to uninvolved people, those elements will determine whether PDRA01 holders will remain PDRA01 holders or whether they will just fly within the open A2.
Well, and also it depends on what happens with SORA methodology for PDRA01 as well. So that you might as well come up and say, well, I might as well just fly in the open category because I've lost the overflight from my PDRA01 OA as well. So I guess we'll talk about these again in the future as we know more information.
Absolutely. And in the meantime, thank you very much for this conversation. And any questions that the audience may have, you can reach out to us, meaning the organization ARPAS UK, at membership@arpas.uk.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anne-Lise.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.